Hello, everybody. Today we have Anand. Anand, welcome to the Ledger Show.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you for having me.
So something that stood out to me was your tagline on your LinkedIn profile. So you have finance and accounting operation. It's really interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more about your role and what you're doing right now?
Yeah, sure. So I started my career as a developer, and then by accident I was working in the ERP systems. So mainly on the account payable and account receivable, and that's how I came into the accounting and finance operations part. Since then, for the last 5 to 7 years, I'm in the same area, but I was working for a different variety of industries, from telecom to insurance to investment, and now in the vacation rental industry. So throughout all my different experiences, whatever I have seen so far is the problems shared by different industries in the area of finance and accounting is somewhat similar, if not much different. And so also the trend of the general trend of finance and accounting, the way it is going towards the automation and towards the big data and AI is common across all the landscape in finance and accounting area, in my opinion.
Okay, that's super interesting because also my background, I'm like a former developer. How did you end up from being a developer to working with ERP?
So I was a developer in Microsoft platforms. So I used to code in .NET initially, and then I was working on a middleware platform called BizTalk Server, which is used to integrate enterprise applications. That's how I ended up in working for large enterprises, where I got a chance to work on some of their ERP implementations. So that's how I ended up from Microsoft to middleware to ERP. And then the first ERP I worked with was Microsoft Dynamics AX, which is a super cool ERP from Microsoft end. And also I have worked with other different ERPs like Sage, Navision, and so on, and also even SAP as well. So it gives a perspective of what exactly the business wants from an ERP, because not all the ERP are tailored for every business, right? For each business, we need to tailor the ERP either to structure down to their business process or change the business process to fit it into an ERP. So this has always been a challenging task to me, I would say.
Does that mean that every company is adding an ERP to their system, they need to customize it somehow?
Yeah, because whenever a company start from the day one, they won't be thinking about long-term solution of having an ERP in their playground. But then when they go to a certain stage, they can't function without an ERP, because all the data that you are gathering in the in silo system may not fit well to each other. So that's when the companies realize they want ERP in their landscape, and then only they will start thinking about having implemented it into their landscape. So that's how I think companies ended up in choosing ERP. And when choosing ERP, as I told earlier, not all the ERPs are built for each and every individual process that is going on in a company, because when companies operate, they tend to change the business process as per their need, and it may not be standardized across all the industries. So when you try to implement, there is going to be a clash between the process and the ERP. So that's when we need to take a call, whether do we tailor our process to fit to ERP, or do we tailor the ERP to accommodate our process. So there is always going to be a trade-off between these two. And in my opinion, as a product manager, how we are handling this trade-off and how we are making sure we bring more value to the business is what the answer lies in.
So I want to dig more into the ERP topic. Yep. But before that, you mentioned something important at the beginning, that the future will bring, or companies in the future will need more automation in finance and accounting.
Exactly.
And I would like to learn more about this. What's your feeling? Is because of the scale of the operations, because everyone is trying to embed finance operation inside their business?
Sure. I can start with a small example that I used to work in my previous position. For instance, we are doing this invoice processing application in the company. And then there is an instance where we need to process the mobile bill of all the employees. So in that organization, there were like 1,000 employees, and every month the mobile company is going to give us the bill with their numbers and the amount that they spend. And then we have an accountant who used to spend 2 days a month on just filling out all the info, taking the data from the PDF and filling it into our invoice system, and then processing it forward. Because we need to segregate the amount into different employees and the different LOBs and so on. So we need the data to be fed into our invoice system for that. And how we tackle this is we found this is a highly repeatable process, and so we try to bring in RPA into our system. So one of the RPA that we used is Assistage, which was a RPA platform by Infosys, and we implemented this solution. And what it does is, whatever the accountant does, the repeatable job, the boring job, it does by itself. For instance, it reads the PDF, and then it creates a CSV file, which have all the information that we need to fit into an invoice. And then at the end of the process, it spits out the CSV file, which we then upload into our invoice platform, which we had at the time was Coupa, right? So by doing this, we could see how much value it is bringing to the accountants and the organization, because now instead of filling this invoice for 2 days a month, they can actually work on more productive things, right? Whatever, for instance, they can work on suggesting a better analytics, or they can drive better decision to the business instead of just filling this, invoice information. So this is one of my experience with automation. So where I could see it is going so much in the future. So almost 75 to 80% of all the work done by the accountant today will be automated somewhere in the future in the next 3 to 5 years. And I could see the trend is catching up, and we are going towards that direction. And what it does to us, it enables the accountant to work on the most productive things that they want to, instead of doing a repeatable job.
Yeah, I don't know whether I should be sadly there are going to be a lot of people that they need to somehow learn new things or just focus on better things.
Yeah.
I had a lot of conversation with finance people, and I learned how they run their teams, and it's kind of fascinating that they're still using spreadsheet pretty much all over, and that's pretty much their database or where they store all the operations. And I mean, they run big businesses on top of a spreadsheet.
Yeah, so that's where the bottleneck I see is coming in, because they are used to running the business using the spreadsheet, but after a certain point of time, the spreadsheet is not going to be much help to us, because of course you can do some things very easily using spreadsheet, but then you cannot take any decision based on a big data, or you can derive a meaningful value out of a spreadsheet. So that's how I see all these new age automation and new age application, which are based on SaaS platform, are coming into picture. And I could see the industry is slowly moving towards that way.
Okay, yeah, that's super interesting. Another trend that I saw is head of finance or CFO also leading the data part of the company. So they want to centralize all this part because it's critical for the company. So they want to see everything there. They want to run decision from there, which I think is an interesting trend.
Yeah, I could see when you talk about centralized part, I could see there is a lot of exposure in using blockchain in accounting and finance these days. I mean, it is still in nascent stage, but I think this will pick up momentum soon as we go in. So now the industry is thinking towards having a blockchain in order to automate our ledger process, or in order to reconcile the transactions and so on. And I can see this is gaining momentum as we go forward in our goal. So
you mentioned reconciliation. I think it's one of the biggest pain. Every time that I had a conversation with a finance manager and I say, okay, I can automate 90% of your reconciliation, they say, no, it's impossible.
Yeah. So I think it is to do with the data that we deal on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes the reconciliation is not so straightforward. You cannot say A equal to B in some cases, where we have to come up with a creative process to reconcile, right? And every month, this is what we will always be hearing, that it's a month end, we have to reconcile all the transaction, and how we are going to deal with it. It's always a major pain point. I think we have a new trend in place which could solve all these issues.
Okay. Is this something that will come from an ERP from your side, like from your perspective?
Yeah, so ERP can help in certain way, but I don't think ERP can solve all the issues because at the end of the day, ERP is ERP. It has its own limitation. It won't be flexible enough to cater us all our needs. So we are going to deal with a unique solution that may cater to our own needs. So that is where I see all these SaaS applications that are coming up is fitting right in. For instance, let's say you want to process an invoice, and most of the invoice processes that I see today, they want to have a OCR application built in, right? Not all the ERP is going to have OCR reader. They cannot just read an invoice and they cannot process it based on the data. So there are certain OCR readers in the market who could do that for you, and then you can just feed the information into our ERP, right? So where I see is ERP is just not a single solution to everything, but then ERP can act as a centralized mechanism wherein all our other tools and applications can fill up the gap.
Okay, I think that's pretty interesting because, like, generally speaking, when a company is trying to, adopt an ERP, they can have a different kind of approach. Like, okay, the ERP is going to fit everything. It's going to be from the supply chain till the finance, till accounting, the closure, all these sort of things. And we're going to jump from spreadsheet to a full ERP implementation. But it seems you have a different opinion. Like it's more like a general ledger, and it's where you put your data company. And then from there, you need to have components that they're going to specialize in a different thing.
Right.
Is that how you say it?
Yeah, that is right. Because based on my experience with the implementation of ERP in larger organizations, there is no one solution fits all approach with any ERP. So there are always going to be an edge cases where we need to solve it by thinking out of the box or taking another route, right? So yeah, so that's where I see all these specialized applications is coming into picture. But then there is this risk, right? Instead of operating in a single ERP, when you work with a different specialized application, there is going to be an issue of data security, and there is an issue of integration. And there are so many issues that we are bringing up when we introduce a new system to a ERP. So it is up to us on how to model and integrate all these different applications into ERP in order to solve these issues. And also my point is ERP, as I told, is built for a generalized purpose, but based on the industry that you operate in, there are always going to be a specific need which only specialized applications can solve those issues. And it is mandatory that we need to have that kind of system that is integrated to an ERP to streamline our business process into an efficient one.
Okay, yeah, that was super interesting. So HomeToGo is a public company, so I think that the scale there for an ERP is completely different from a startup. But when is like the right time to consider we should implement like an ERP for a company?
So if you ask me, I would say it's on the day one. When you start a company, you should think about ERP because that's the really good time to implement any ERP. So if not, of course, there is going to be a point where you cannot deal with your spreadsheet anymore, and you will start thinking about ERP. At the time, my advice is to just don't think about ERP, just think about your process as well. Just make sure the business processes that you are running in your organization are a standardized one, or there is something which is relevant to everyone in the area, not just for you. Because when you go with the ERP, you are going to have this conversation then. How do I fit this into this process into my ERP, which is not going to be so useful. So yeah, in my opinion, we should have it as soon as possible, preferably by day one. If not, at least by end of year one or year two, you should start thinking about ERP in your organization.
Okay. You made like an interesting distinction at the beginning. You said you should either feed, like the ERP is going to feed you or you're going to feed the ERP.
Yeah.
What is like the right approach?
There is no right approach or there is no one single method for this problem. It is up to us how the trade-off is going to happen. So, for instance, if you are going to change your ERP so much just to fit your process, there are other parts in the ERP which may not work as you wanted. And for instance, if you change your business process so much, it is going to be a trouble for the people who are working right now because the process is changing so much and they should adapt to that process, right? So I think it is to be decided based on case by case. And also we need to align with our stakeholders on which one makes more sense. Sometimes the business process that we are having is mainly based on the edge cases. We are trying to handle everything using this process. But then let's see if the number of edge cases that we are handling is very less, then we should think about tailoring that process into a standardized process that any ERP could handle. If not, let's say the process is really good, but then let's say if the ERP is not able to handle that process, then we need to think about the impact of tailoring the ERP for that particular process. There are cases where we may have to change the core functionality of the ERP drastically in order to just fit our process. So at the time, we need to think about how it is going to affect technically, because is it going to be too much work that we are putting into ERP to fit our process? If not, we can just go ahead with it. So that is how I usually decide when to go for it.
I think there is a long list of companies that try to implement ERPs and then failed along the way.
Yeah, so it's just not about failing or successfully implementing, I would say. It's about the time frame, right? So we should have a realistic time frame when we start thinking about ERP. Because I was aware of one ERP implementation, which I started in 2015. And after working for a couple of years, I moved on from that company and I was working for a different company. And my friend took over the project and he was still working on the project till 2021. And it was just completed in 2022 beginning. So it took years and years together because, I mean, not all the implementation is that because of the nature of that implementation, where we acquired two different companies and we are trying to fit into one target ERP from two different ERP. So that's why it took more time. But realistically, in order to implement ERP into an organization, it will take anywhere between 6 months to 1 year just to start, and then to onboard more and more of your process into ERP. It is a lifelong process. So you can keep adding more process as and when you are ready with your ERP implementation.
Okay, now I feel like I want to challenge you because you have the background as a developer. Like you would never use something that will take 6 months to implement. I'm finding hard time understanding this difference. Like, I mean, if you talk to a CTO and the vendor says, okay, it's going to take 6 months, the CTO is going to reply, we have no time for that. It's going to be either a couple of weeks or a month, but I'm not going to buy it. Like, why is that different in finance?
So, since you're a developer, I think you can connect me well on this. So, when we start tailoring ERP, let's say you are touching an account object, right? And the account object may be joined with invoices, maybe joined with your billing information and so on at the back end. Let's say you want to change this account somehow, maybe you want to add some fields in the account or reduce some fields. But when you start working on it, you will find the impact will be more, right? Because let's say if you are deleting something from the account object, maybe you will be deleting something related to the billing information, and it could have a cascading effect on all the other modules where the billing info or address is used. So that's where, as a developer, we always go with the bigger number because we know what are the challenges that we could face when we started tailoring the ERP. So, okay, I know it's not realistic from CTO's point of view because it is just, hey, just add a field or remove a field. But then as a developer, we know how painful it is going to be. And we need to make sure it covers all the cases, like 100% of the cases. And it does not impact any other module or any other functionality within the ERP. So yeah, that is the realistic timeline in my opinion.
Okay. I mean, it does make sense. I had a conversation with a friend. He works for a big company here in Berlin. It's another scale up unicorn here in Berlin, and they're running on Zoo, and they decided to implement an ERP finally. But the timeline is 6 months.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, more realistically, 1 year.
Yeah.
And we're just going to focus on finance first, and then we're going to also bring procurement and the supply chain. And I mean, another thing that surprised me was the first part. We're going to have 200 hours of onboarding, and it's just going to be a course between us and the consultant bringing in the system. So it's a really long process.
Yeah, it's also the way we are starting with this, right? If we're thinking about implementing this ERP with all the existing process, fitting everything there, and get the ground running from the day one, it is not going to happen. So I mean, the realistic solution is maybe you start with something a simpler process. Maybe you can bring your account payable or account receivable, and then you can slowly move towards having other functionalities like a procurement or order to cash. So you can slowly onboard the other part of your business as well. But then we should start something simple and small so that we will just have the ERP in place, and then we can slowly onboard the other areas. I think that would be the right approach to go.
I see. There is like an interesting trend that I see. They're like SaaS companies, like cutting down the functionality of the ERP because they are going to be more specialized. They're going to have a better user interface, or maybe they are not just going to charge for the user, which user is paying with the ERP because you pay by them. It's also a trend that you see. Like, do you have any take on this?
Yeah, sure. So in my previous job, we had a dedicated in-house built invoice processing application, and it was developed like 10 years back, and then it started to show cracks because it was a headache for us to maintain it in-house. So that's when we decided to move towards a SaaS platform. And then we were evaluating different providers who are giving us this invoice processing capability. And that's when we stumbled with Coupa. So I think Coupa is one of the leading provider in Europe for invoice processing. And we have implemented that. But we had learned few lessons while implementing such a SaaS platform, right? So the first thing is, it is going to make our life easier because the maintaining the application is not with us. We are not going to spend any effort on keeping this application up and running. So this is going to be with the solution provider. In this case, it is Coupa. But then the challenges that we face is, for instance, there are certain process downstream. In case of if it is an invoice, we have a general ledger system, which was also legacy. And we were not able to just easily replace like how we are replacing invoice processing application. So we had to keep this legacy general ledger running with this new Coupa. So that's where we faced an issue because the old in-house built application was primarily designed keeping this general ledger system in mind. So it was working smoothly. But then Coupa is having much more capability, and it covers variety of audience, and it has handled variety of use cases. But then when you don't replace your general ledger system, integrating the general ledgers coming out of the invoices into your system is going to be another nightmare, right? So where we had to work on a thinner solution in terms of bringing the invoices down to another system and creating a general ledger line and passing it to our GL system. So there is always going to be a hacky or workaround solution that we keep doing, even if we go towards SaaS way, right? So SaaS may solve the good part of our problem, but it not solve all the problem. We are still going to deal with other applications that is going on in our organization, which may be developed in legacy technologies.
You mentioned this word a couple of times, integrations between your ERP and the other solution. Maybe you're adding to that. How critical is to have proper integrations?
Yeah, so in my opinion, since I started my career as an integration developer, I understand more from technical point of view. Whenever you have any enterprise systems, you need to make sure you have a proper integration architecture, because when you start a new company, or when your company is in a growing phase, you may think of a fast solution, which would be just integrate system A to system B and system A to system C. But then when your organization grow in size, all these noodles of integration is going to mess up in big time. So that's when we should have a good integration architecture in place. For instance, I would suggest like a hub and spoke model, where you can have a hub and then you can all the application will be in a different spoke and everything will be connecting to the hub. And your hub is going to be like a single source of truth or single source of information for all the other applications that you use in our organization. So in case if the company is thinking about implementing an ERP or thinking about bringing in new system, they should start thinking about this integration architecture right away. So are we going to go with publish subscribe model, or are we going to go with hub and spoke architecture, or what is the best way to deal all this integration? Because when you grow in size, the problem with the data is going to grow exponentially. Mm-hmm. But if you have a proper integration architecture in place, and you have a good control of all your data, of which data is going to which system, and if you want to mask the data or if you want to expose it to a new system, it will be easier for us to do so, and it will increase the value exponentially.
I mean, some of the applications that you can find on the market right now, they have what is so-called like two-way sync. So you can change things on the application, but also on the ERP side, and then they're going to sync automatically. Do you feel this is like a critical functionality, or it can lead to problems?
So what I think is when we talk about sync, there are two kinds of syncs. One is unidirectional sync or bidirectional sync, right? It depends on, let's say, you have two applications or two systems, A and B. If all your updates or the new additions are going to be in system A, then it makes sense to have a single directional sync, because your system A is going to be a source of truth or the master data information for your system and application. Let's say if you want to expose these two different applications to different users and both may update or create the same record, then it makes sense to have a bidirectional sync between systems, right? So in my opinion, it depends on which kind of process you are running. Based on that, you can have either a unidirectional or bidirectional sync. And also, when we talk about sync, we need to take a lot more things into consideration because of the process intensive. Some process or some applications, if you keep running this sync on a real time, there is going to be an impact on your systems as well, right? So you can think about scheduling a batch, or where you can update once a day from one system to another, or across the system you could sync once a day or once a week and so on, based on what the volume that we are speaking and how the data is look like.
Okay, that was pretty interesting. So now you're like a product manager with a focus on finance and accounting operations.
Yeah.
At HomeToGo. Like, can you tell us a little bit more about like what are your goals there? What do you plan to achieve there?
Sure. So as a product manager, my focus is mainly to build a scalable application in any organization. And also not only that, but also to manage stakeholder expectation from different departments. And I act as the interface between the finance and accounting team and to the other departments, and also helping the other stakeholders getting things done by removing the roadblocks or translating the requirements, managing prioritization, managing product backlog, and so on. So that is where I see my role fits in HomeToGo as is.
It's really interesting. Like, so you have the head of finance, just making a name right now, joining the sprint and say, okay, these are the features that we need in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. Okay. I mean, that's a really interesting use case, to be honest. Never heard like finance as a stakeholder.
I mean, when you're a product manager, there are going to be stakeholders who always wants to get their things done. So today it could be a director of finance, tomorrow it could be a head of accounting, and day after tomorrow it could be someone else. But everyone will push for their things to move on. But as a product manager, we should have a vision and focus on how should we prioritize, which is going to bring in more value. And of course, there are a lot of framework where we could employ in order to pick the right problem to work for. And based on that, I think we can go about it. So prioritization is always the key in any product manager's role.
Okay. So you're a product manager. I guess you have also a technical team there?
Sorry?
So you're a product manager there. So I guess you also have a technical team, like doing the okay. How hard it is to work from outside to develop application for the ERP? That's a kind of technical question.
Yeah. So we have a different team for technology, and then we have a different business team, and then we have a core business team, and so on. But then, since I came from a developer background, so I understand all the technical challenges. For instance, let's say if a business user comes and asks for a feature, which I know it could, if it is going to take a lot more time to implement, then as a first step, I can answer it myself. I know how much intensive this work is going to be, and I can then prioritize based on that information. If not, I will approach the developer to get the required information and to do the prioritization accordingly, and I can give it to my stakeholders.
Okay. I guess that the other option between having you and internal team working on the ERP implementation, also on extending the ERP, is working with consultant or working with the ERP provider.
Yeah.
Why you should decide one or the other?
So of course, there is going to be a choice whether you could hire some developers with you and you could try to implement this internally, or else you could go with a third-party consultant who can do this for you. But in my opinion, it is better to go with a third-party consultant because who are very much proficient in implementing this kind of ERP, and they may have done for the other organizations in the past, which is in the similar industry or similar size, and they know well better than us on suggesting us on how to move forward with the implementation. So I would like to go for a third party in order to implement ERP. But if it is something that is related to product, and if there is something that if you think your internal team is having more knowledge, then it makes sense to implement that in-house, right? Because that will give you more control, and also you have the full picture and everything is with you on that.
Okay. So I guess there is a kind of trade-off that you need to be aware of depending on what you want to achieve.
Exactly.
Okay, makes sense. And another topic that I wanted to touch together was about cross-border and challenges and whether an ERP can help with this.
Yeah, sure. So cross-border challenge is going to be there no matter if you have an ERP or not, because when you started operating in a new market, you are going to deal with tons and tons of regulations in terms of tax or in terms of legal and so on. So I don't think ERP can do much about it. Of course, there are some standardized processes if you use in ERP, it could solve some of the issue. But then these are all the implications that we need to solve no matter if we have an ERP or not. And this is always one of the pain points when we enter a new market. So you always have to think about how the tax implications are going to look like, and in the new market, how the structure of you operating is going to look like, and so on.
I see. It is also this one, like another case where you need either an external application or you need to modify ERP to really work with that specific country. I think about you as an example, you have 24 plus countries. Yeah,
for instance, as I said, US, I can take an example of US. So in US, we have like 50 different states, and also we have in each state, we have a different cities and jurisdictions. For instance, let's say you are a marketplace operator like us. Let's say if a host is letting their apartment, then they need to comply with their particular state or particular jurisdiction, right? and each jurisdiction is going to have their own requirement and their own legal and tax requirements, right? So I don't think there is a single ERP which could solve for all this. So that's when you can go to the marketplace and find third-party tax providers who could solve all this problem for us. And then maybe through an approach like an API or an interface, which we could just plug into our ERP and then solve all the issue at once by using this third-party provider. So I think that is our approach should be when we deal with cross-market platforms.
Okay. I mean, I think it's time to wrap up. It was a super insightful conversation about the ERPs. I didn't know you were a developer before, so it was even more interesting. Yeah. Okay. Ready for a quick fire round of questions?
Sure.
I mean, given that you're working for HomeToGo, what are the places that you plan to visit this year?
So yeah, that's a good question. So I'm planning to visit Portugal and Norway before end of this year.
Okay.
I'm just working on the vacation plan.
Nice. Where are you going to Portugal? Like, is there any cities or place that you want to visit? Right?
So I don't have any specific place in mind. HomeToGo especially operates on the rural area. So I want to explore more on the rural side of it.
Okay. Yeah, Porto is really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really nice place. Okay. What book would you recommend to our audience?
So if you're asking for accounting perspective or in general?
Okay. Let's say that a developer wants to learn more about accounting or about ERP or about finance. Is there any book for that?
I would suggest, instead of a book, I would suggest them to learn by practicing it.
Okay.
So by doing, you can learn way faster and way better than by going through a book. Of course, book will give you a knowledge to kickstart, but it's always good to have a hands-on, in my opinion. So I suggest go and play with it and learn it.
It's really good, like building a micro ERP.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your main passion outside of work?
Yeah. So my main passion is chess. So I play a lot of chess.
Okay.
I compete in online competitions and so on. A few years back, I used to play for corporate level, but not anymore. I just play online. So that's one of my passion. That's
pretty cool. If I'm not mistaken, you recently moved to Berlin. Are you also playing chess here?
Yeah. So I heard about the chess bars in Berlin. So since I'm just new to Berlin, I'm going to start exploring that as well because it sounds interesting to play chess in a chess bar.
Yeah, nice. Last question. Is there anything specific that you're learning right now? Like a new skill or?
Yeah, sure. So what I'm learning right now is I'm trying to learn more of coding. From coding, I'm trying to learn PHP because I have very little knowledge of it and I want to scale myself in that. That is just outside my work, just for my personal satisfaction, I'm doing that. Yeah.
I guess I really have to ask this question. Do you miss being a developer?
I miss it a lot. Yeah, because when you're a developer, I think the world looks so much interesting because when you start working on the for loops and if conditions and so on, I think that gives me more joy. Yeah, I mean, of course I miss, but yeah, product manager is equally challenging work that requires more effort than being a developer because when you're a product manager, you're not just dealing with the code, you're dealing with the people, and that takes a lot more skill and commitment from your end.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah. Okay, so if people want to find out more about HomeToGo, they can check the website, hometogo.com. And if people want to get in touch with you or not, what is the best way?
You can come to my website. It's www.anandvenkatraman.com. It's my first name, last name.com. There you will find all the information about me. You can contact me through that.
Okay. Anand, thank you for joining me today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Krishna. It was a nice conversation.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll meet somewhere in